we go.
I did not have Twilight wedding money. I had about $1,000 in materials in my mom's backyard, 6 boxes of Wisteria, and the survival instincts of a woman who has already told too many people, don't worry, I can make it. And that is how I ended up spending a week and a half in a tree building this hanging Wisteria ceremony installation for our backyard wedding. Not the chandelier, not the 10 flowers, that was a completely separate emotional breakdown with its own supply list. So welcome back to DIY Bride Diaries, where the budget is tight, the vision is expensive, and OSHA would absolutely not approve.
Is that an 8-pound test?
This whole thing started because my husband and I were supposed to elope. Cute, simple. Low stress. Then we remembered we loved our families, which was honestly very inconvenient for the budget, and suddenly our tiny elopement became an 85-person backyard wedding at my mom's house with less than a month to pull it off. So naturally, instead of choosing peace, I looked at the tree in her backyard and I was like, what if this looked like a Twilight wedding? Except the Twilight wedding had a movie budget, professional set designers, probably permits, and nobody's mother yelling from the porch like, Savannah, please get down. I had Amazon Wisteria, steel cable, fishing line, zip ties, an extension ladder, and a personality disorder called I Saw It in My Head, and now everyone has to suffer.
Oh, is that Bunny Foo Foo? Look at that hair. Oh my gosh. Mom.
And before anyone starts typing, is this safe in the comments, just know I am not presenting this as professional advice. I am presenting this as a cautionary tale with a beautiful ending. And this was the biggest, most time-consuming, most what have I gotten myself into project of the entire wedding. The first thing I did was stare at this tree for an unreasonable amount of time, because having a vision is cute until you realize the vision requires steel cable, fishing line, ladders, weatherproof lights, netting, spray paint, and upper body strength. I had a ChatGPT rendering of what I wanted the ceremony space to feel like, and I also had drone footage of what the backyard looked like before we started. I'm really glad I filmed that because it makes the transformation feel even crazier. This was my mom's actual backyard, not a venue, not a styled shoot location, not one of those backyard weddings where the backyard is secretly a millionaire's private garden estate. The first real step was building the support structure. My husband helped me with this part.
There you go.
And we ran the cable through the trees to create the main outline for the installation. The shape ended up being kind of like a trapezoid suspended between the tree limbs, and I know that sounds very official, but please understand, I was not out here with an engineering degree. So I'm gonna put it here.
They got reach?
I was just a DIY bride squinting at a tree like, yeah, that'll probably hold, because I wasn't just hanging a few little flower strands, I was creating a whole suspended ceremony installation. Once the steel cable was in place, I started working on the fishing line grid. This was the part that took the most time and looked the least impressive on camera, which is so rude. Once the fishing line grid was finally up, I moved into the lighting. This was the first point where I started to feel like, okay, I'm not completely delusional. Maybe this is actually going to look magical. I used outdoor waterproof lights from Amazon. They were UV resistant and meant for outside because this was going to be exposed to weather, and I did not want to electrocute my wedding guests in the name of ambiance. We ran an extension cord out to the tree, and then I used one of those multi-plug splitter things so I can connect multiple boxes of lights from one area. I started wrapping the tree itself with lights, and then I used the fishing line grid to create hanging strands throughout the canopy. I wanted the lights to look like they were dripping through the tree, almost like little glowing icicles. So the way I did that was by zip tying the lights at the top, moving over about a foot or a foot and a half, letting the strand hang down to whatever length I wanted, and then doubling it back up and twisting the two sides together. Then I zip tied it again to the fishing line so it wouldn't slide all over the place. I staggered the lengths because I didn't want it to look too perfect. Perfect would have made it look fake. But truly, staggering the lights made such a difference. Some were longer, some were shorter, and it made the whole thing feel softer and more organic. Once the lights were up, I remember thinking, honestly, this is really pretty. I could probably stop here. And then I did not stop, because stopping when something looks good enough is apparently not a skill I possess. The next step was figuring out the wisteria, and this is where the project really became a full-time job. I knew I did not want to individually tie each piece of wisteria while standing on a ladder, because even I have limits. Somewhere deep down, hard to find, but they do exist. So I used the clear fish netting as the base. The idea was that I could attach the wisteria to the netting, create sections, and then attach those sections to the fishing line grid in the tree. We cut the clear fish netting panel in half, and then we used T-posts to create a temporary hanging station on the ground. I think we did 3 sets of 2 T-posts, and then we hung the netting across the top of them so I could work with it at a normal height. This was one of the better choices I made because it allowed me to actually see how the wisteria was hanging before trying to get it into the tree. It also made it easier for people to help me without needing to also become emotionally involved with an extension ladder. My friend Bree came over for an afternoon and helped me hang a lot of the wisteria onto the netting. Bree was in my betrayal trauma group and was also a DIY bride herself, so she understood the exact genre of crazy I was operating in. There is something very specific about a DIY bride helping another DIY bride. No judgment, no are you sure, just immediate acceptance of the chaos. Before we hung the netting back up, I realized the clear netting was going to show more than I wanted it to, and I could not unsee it. it, so we took the netting off and spray painted it green. The green made the netting disappear into the foliage way better, especially from the front facing angle where the guests would be looking during the ceremony. That was something that I kept reminding myself throughout this whole project. I did not need every angle to be perfect. I needed the important angles to be perfect. I needed the ceremony angle beautiful. I needed the aisle angle beautiful. I needed the photos to feel magical. These are the same ones that I spray painted in the last tutorial that I made for my Wisteria chandelier tutorial, so you guys can look at that to see how I spray painted those flowers specifically. I just used those same flowers over here in this area for the ceremony area. And I didn't coat every piece exactly the same way. Some areas got more paint, some areas got less, and that actually created dimension. It made the wisteria look less flat and less plastic. The ivory color warmed it up and helped it blend better with the tree, the lights, and the overall backyard wedding vibe. I used about 6 boxes of wisteria for this ceremony tree installation. I know 6 boxes sounds like a lot until you're trying to cover an actual tree canopy. Then 6 boxes suddenly feels like you're trying to decorate a football field with a boutonniere, and this is exactly where I had to be strategic because I did not have the budget to make it as dense as the Twilight wedding. I was not working with 160,000 wisteria blooms and a movie production crew. I was working with roughly $1,000 in materials and the physical stamina of a woman running on stress and love. Stress and love. So I focused on the fullness where it mattered most. I put more density where we could actually stand for the ceremony, where the photos would be taken and where the guests would naturally look. That is one of my biggest tips. If you are trying to do DIY wedding decor on a budget, do not try to make every single inch perfect. Make the focal points count. Your guests are not thinking, wow, I wish there was 14% more wisteria on the back left branch. They're thinking, this looks beautiful. At least that's what I'm telling myself. Now, one of the biggest mistakes I made was trying to hang one giant section of wisteria all at once. Do not do this. I repeat, do not do this. It got tangled immediately, like offensively fast, and it started becoming one big floral rat's nest, and I was like, I ended up having to go back up into the tree and cut the wisteria sections apart in different places so it would hang more naturally. Smaller sections are better, little patches are better, layering is better, staggered lengths are better, and honestly, having gaps is not always bad because the tree itself becomes part of the design. I wanted it to look like the tree and the installation were working together. Once I got the first sections up, that's when I started getting really excited because suddenly I could see it. I could see the ceremony space becoming what I had imagined. Originally, I had planned for us to get married under some kind of arch with curtain panels on both sides. That was the first version. But once the lights and wisteria started going to the tree, I realized the tree was the arch. The tree was the ceremony backdrop. The tree was the moment. So I scrapped the idea of having fabric hanging down on both sides and decided I wanted the wisteria to frame us from above instead. That changed the whole feel of the ceremony. It made it feel more immersive, like the guests were stepping into this little hidden garden area. Expanding the design meant I needed more flowers. I bought some additional florals from Michael's to add more texture, hanging floral pieces so it would all look like the same strand repeated over and over. I also added more density over the actual ceremony space where we were going to say our vows, not just over the aisle or guest seating area. Because when I look at the ceremony photos now, that is what made the whole thing feel intentional. Look at me. I basically lived at my mom's house day in, day out. I was there working on wedding stuff. My son Gunnar was there with me a lot. After school, my husband took him home so many evenings so I could stay late and keep working. And I'm just so thankful for that because there's no way I could have pulled this off without my family. This wedding was not just me DIYing a bunch of stuff. It was my mom letting me take over her backyard. It was my husband helping when he could, even though he was working a ton leading up to the wedding. It was friends coming over for random afternoons. It was family showing up and helping. It was everyone contributing in different ways. And I know I joke about being a perfectionist, but that was genuinely one of the reasons I did so much of this tree myself. I had this vision in my head and I didn't always know how to explain it.
Call it a night with that one.
But it was hard to hand somebody else a zip tie and be like, okay, now please execute the forest wedding fantasy currently living in my brain. That's a lot to ask of somebody. So a lot of the time I just did it myself. But I was so thankful for every single person who came over and helped, even for a couple hours. My friend Molly came over one afternoon and helped me. My best friend came over one evening and helped hold the ladder, which was honestly probably the most important job because everyone was tired of seeing me almost become a family story. People would come home and I would still be in the tree. Nighttime, still in the tree. Dinner time, tree. Somebody saying, Savannah, it looks good enough. Me in the tree, pretending I suddenly couldn't hear. At some point, I bought a tool belt, and honestly, the tool belt changed my life, not dramatically enough to make me stop climbing trees, but enough to make me slightly more efficient while making questionable choices. The green spray painted netting, the dollar store greenery, the ivory wisteria, the lights. By the time the wedding came around, it looked like the tree had just decided to participate, which is exactly what I wanted. And while I was doing this tree, my mom was working on the garden. She had a completely different set of goals, and honestly, thank God, because the area around the tree ended up just being as important as the tree itself. At the same time, my mom, Elle, Dylan, Devin, Devin and different friends and family were helping with yard work, planting, moving things, and turning the whole backyard into something that actually felt like a venue. It was a lot, it was chaotic, it was messy, it was stressful. It was also really beautiful to see everyone working on different parts of the same day. One of my favorite things my mom found was these stone benches from Facebook Marketplace. The second I saw them, I was like, oh my gosh, those need to be where our parents sit. They framed the aisle perfectly and they made the ceremony space feel a lot more grounded and special. I had crossback chairs for guests and I kept the chair decor simple with ribbon inside the aisle chairs because the tree was already the main character. The night before our wedding, my dad and Devin sat on those stone benches and had one of those serious little talks, you know the kind, the I'm not trying to intimidate you, but this is also my daughter kind of talk. And it happened right there under the Wisteria in the ceremony space I had spent all this time building. The day before the wedding, my family was in town and one of my best friends, Yadira, had come in and helped so much. We had a very informal rehearsal dinner and everyone helped us set up the ceremony chairs. My husband and I practiced walking down the aisle. We practiced our first dance. This was worth it. All of the climbing, all of the zip ties, all of the spray paint, all of the I swear I'm almost done lies. I told everyone around me it was worth it. At some point, someone probably should have staged an intervention, but honestly, I'm so proud of how it came out. I really do not want to take it down. If my mom would let me, I would rent this space out as a tiny wedding venue or at least let people use it as a photo backdrop. This did not look DIY in the end. It looked magical. It looked like a real ceremony installation. It looked like the kind of thing I could not afford to pay somebody else to make. Once again, this entire ceremony tree cost me around $1,000 in materials. All of the materials are linked in my bio, and obviously the price would be different depending on your tree, the size for your space, how dense you want it, and how much floral coverage you're going for, but for me, it was around $1,000. If I had hired this out through a florist or wedding designer, especially with the scale of the tree, the lighting, the rigging, the labor, and the fact that it was a custom suspended outdoor ceremony installation, this would easily have been 5 figures, and after doing it myself, I understand why. Because wedding vendors are not just charging for flowers, they are charging for design, planning, labor, installation, risk, setup, expertise. I saved my money because I paid for it with my body and my time and my sanity and probably a few years off my knees. So would I recommend doing this? Yes and no. Yes, because it was the most beautiful and meaningful parts of our wedding. No, because I care about you. If you're going to attempt something like this, please start earlier than you think you need to. Have somebody help you, have somebody hold the ladder, use outdoor rated materials, test the lights, buy the tool belt, buy more zip ties than you think any normal person could ever need, and do not under any circumstances tell yourself, this should only take a day. That's how the tree wins. Okay. But if you're a DIY bride, a budget bride, or somebody planning a backyard wedding and you have a big vision that you cannot afford to hire out, I hope this gives you some ideas. You do not need a Twilight wedding budget to create something magical. You just need to be strategic, focus on the angles that matter, use the natural space you already have, layer textures, paint things that look too fake, hide the mechanics, let people help you. And accept at some point, someone you love is going to tell you it looks good enough and you are going to ignore them. This tree became the heart of our ceremony. It was where our parents sat. It was where our families gathered. It was where my dad talked to my husband the night before the wedding. It was where we practiced our first dance. It's where we said our vows. So no, I did not have the budget for the Twilight wedding, but I did have my mom's backyard, my family, my friends, my husband, and my son running around while we built it. Let me know down in the comments if you would ever get married under this tree, and if you want to build something similar, everything I used is linked in my bio.